Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the writer of the new Image series, The Me You Love in the Dark, as well as the writer and artist of like a million other things. It's Skottie Young. Thanks for coming on, Skottie.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's good to talk to you again.
So, it's launch week. It's a launch week for The Me You Love in the Dark. We're recording this on Friday, August 6th, which means that came out 2 days ago. How are you doing?
Oh, man, it's been awesome. It's just been so great. The response has been amazing. We were talking here in the studio. It's been the fastest turnaround of a project that I've ever done. Like from conception to publication, and probably would have been faster had we not pressed pause on it. But in the middle of the pandemic, but it's really cool to just have watched this thing like get on the tracks and start rolling. And now it's here. It's really here. And the reviews are great and people seem to dig it and they get it.
Yeah.
I love how in depth everybody is reviewing it, it's just been great. We're very excited. I'm very excited for everybody to finally see more of the genius that is Jorge Corona, and Jean-Francois. So yeah, it's been an awesome week so far.
Are launch weeks normally pretty busy for you, or is it like kind of business as usual, or you just happen to look at Twitter a little bit more, basically?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's that busy. I would say that the couple of weeks leading up to it seem maybe 2-3 weeks beforehand, because that's usually when you're doing interviews and filling out interviews and everybody's requesting. Mm-hmm. So you have to, the time wise, you're picking and choosing which ones you do and kind of triaging that. But yeah, that's more interesting, or that's more busy than launch week. Launch week, you're like kind of like the work's done.
Right.
Now it's just go to Comic Book Roundup and see all the reviews. I mean, I'm not going to be. I know everybody likes to pretend they don't read their own reviews, but they're all lying. They read them all.
I do think it's funny. Comic Book Roundup. So I've always wondered if creators go there and just be like, "What did I get? Oh, damn, it's a 95 or 9.5 or whatever."
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't actually care about the number, because I was trying to explain it to Megan, who runs the company here. I was trying to explain Comic Book Roundup's aggregation. So it's just a mess. Like there's no. Because one site might be 4 out of 5. One site is grading out of 10. One site doesn't even have a grading system.
Right. So they're just like, this seems like a 7.
You could read a 10 and a 6 review, and they are equally glowing.
Right.
And so that 6 tanks you. So yeah, I learned real quickly it's not that. I actually do enjoy reviews, not to let me know if I did a good job or not, but I genuinely like to see how what the story is, how the story's landing through different people's perspectives. Like I think Middle West was a prime example of reading reviews and seeing how different people interpreted the story. Like I heard dads would interpret it different than sons, and it was very. I like that. I like to be like, and sometimes I'm like, man, I didn't think of that. That's good. Like that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting. I was actually reading a bunch of old interviews you had done in prep for this, and I read one where you were talking about Middle West in specific, and about how somebody was like, "What is this about?" And you're like, your answer was effectively, it really depends on the person. It's like, I want to know what it meant to you when you read it. And right. And I do think that's interesting, because reviews are in a lot of ways like a shortcut to getting to a more nuanced view of what somebody felt when they read your book for the first time.
Exactly. Yeah. I do like, because I feel the same way when I read a story. I'm gonna connect to probably a different character than you're gonna connect to, or I'm gonna see it through different lens and it's gonna hit me in a different way. And I think that's the beauty of what we all do, is we create things and put it out in the world. And I compare music and comics a lot, and I think music's like that. The song 3 AM by Matchbox 20, as released to the public, sounds like this pop song about a breakup. And in reality, it was written on a piano and really slow, and about Rob Thomas's mom being sick with cancer,
right?
And staying up all night, and sleeping all day. So you'd never know that from listening to the poppy, upbeat version of that. And that's the great thing about art, is we kind of put it out there in the world, and past that, like I've done my job, it's over. Now it's your job to finish your version of what the creation that we made is.
People do love saying in comics the reader is the final collaborator. So sure. that kind of makes sense. I do want to say though, so it's been a shockingly long time since you've been on the show. I look back, last time you were on was episode 48. I'm over 300 now, which is nuts.
I was gonna say, I feel like it was in Seattle too, right? Did we sit down in Seattle, or were we on
I
the
think
phone?
we just talked in Seattle. I don't think we actually sat down there. I think we talked
You know what, you're
shortly
right.
thereafter, but
Oh,
yeah.
you were getting ready to interview someone else in Seattle while I was chatting with you. I think that's what
Yeah, I think we were walking and you were going somewhere and I was going towards an interview, but
right.
anyway, so last time you were on the podcast, it's funny looking back. You were still on I Hate Fairyland. You're near. I don't even know if you're nearing the finish, but since then, at the very least, I tried to like get down to everything you've done. You completed that. You've written a run on Deadpool. You've been busy with Strange Academy. You've drawn a bunch of covers. You've co-created and completed Middle West and Bully Wars at Image. You created a YouTube channel, made a ton of content on there, and now you have The Me You Love in the Dark. Am I missing anything? It just feels like I don't know. It feels like a lot, and also like I'm missing something simultaneously.
I think that's about right. I do have another book that's in progress. We haven't announced it yet at Image, but it's co-created with Kyle Strom, who shares a studio with us right now. But that's in progress. That'll be out sometime in 2022. But that's pretty much it. Also, I started my company kind of in earnest since then too. Stupid Fresh Messes. It went from me just kind of doing daily sketches and selling those, and having a couple prints, and my wife would pack those up. And then when we had our second kid, Milo, we kind of shut the store down. But since then, we met our friend Megan, and she's a badass, and so she helped us open the company back up. And now I think they shipped out 300-400 packages this week, and
Wow.
and they have about 500 more to make it through from the current batch of covers and stuff that we just launched for The Me You Love in the Dark. We had a store exclusive. So I have a company, and I have payroll and weird stuff like that. So that's crazy.
I think that's awesome. I mean, honestly, it's like I had Elsa Chartier on the podcast recently, and we talked about how she's kind of using like her YouTube channel and the art books that she does and things like that is, it's like, you might not be drawing forever. Might not be doing all these things forever. And like, you're trying to find a way to make life easier on future Elsa or future Skottie and things like that. And it's
100%.
like when I look at, your website, it's actually kind of amazing. So you got the new website, you have those like the collector market is like insane right now. And there's no reason why, if you have the ability to do so, you wouldn't try to, this sounds worse than I mean it to be, but capitalize on it. And sure. It's like you have like exclusive book plates, you have signed copies, you have like a section for CGC slabs. I mean, those are things that people are like clamoring for. So why not fill that need?
That was happening, and people were coming to us, and then we were like, well, why are we waiting for other people to ask us to help that side of it? Why aren't we just doing it ourselves? So we started doing it. We are a full-blown diamond account. We are a diamond retailer, so we can do exclusive SkottieYoung.com covers for any book that we want that allows it. So, we've done Marvel ones, we've done obviously our books in Image. So we've crossed over to that line because, like you said, like there's a market out there for that, and I don't think it's a bad word at all to say to capitalize, because we're all in a business, and
right.
And I think it's great when we can actually take the art that we all love and actually make it a successful business. So that's, to me, it's super fun. But yeah, it's a new world, and it's an interesting world to navigate. Luckily, I have some really smart people here working with me and for me to help navigate all that and build it, because I'm good at thinking up things, but I'm not great at organizing them all and pulling them all. And then, Megan and John here. Megan has come up with so many great ideas to keep bringing people in and promote new things. And so it's pretty great. But like you said, it's a way to make sure that, like, if I can't draw anymore, or something happens here. I mean, it's also why I started writing. I really kind of doubling down on that and making sure that I have a lot of table legs under my table, so if one or two of them get knocked out, it's okay. I'd like about 20 table legs under there,
No, I mean, it is really smart because, I mean, especially with the pandemic year and there's no conventions and everything like that, it's really interesting because, people still want that experience. People still want that connection. People still want those things. And this is giving you a way to make up for the fact that you don't have those conventions while still supplying the thing that people are looking for anyways.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's one thing that we were really surprised about when everything shut down. We didn't know how we were going to proceed, because we thought, God, is everybody's being sent home from work? Is anybody going to shop online? Should we even be in a room together? Which at first, we were trying to decide, do we push pause on the store? Which
Right.
at that point, at that point, we had only been open about 6 months, and it was really successful. But we were like, well, I guess we can just kind of relaunch when this is done. But our families decided to bubble up. We only live about half a mile from each other, and our studio is only a mile from the house. So it's very easy, and it's just completely our building. So there's no other. So we just kind of pushed forward ahead with it, and we learned that people still wanted the things that they usually want. They want the signed books from conventions. They want the sketches. They want a shot at original art. They want new prints and all that stuff. So basically we just turned the convention experience into our online store, and everything that you would get at a table, you're going to get here, except you don't have to buy a plane ticket. You don't have to post up at a hotel for the weekend. You don't have to feed your kids for 3 days, on crappy junk convention hall food. So in a lot of ways we realized, like, wow, did we just like basically, like, before you'd go to 5 conventions, but we just worked it out to where we basically replaced like 100 conventions. Just everything worked, and it was global, right? Because usually when you go to convention, you can serve this area, this area, this area, and it was great. It ended up being great. And it was really good for me to be able to interact with so many people as well. Like, Megan's helped to build such a community that we get like snack boxes and gift baskets and all types of stuff because she's so personable on like with the groups and all the fan groups. So it's been interesting to take that convention community
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just say, hey, we can do a version of that here online and virtually.
I feel like you had the comic creator equivalent of the moment in The Matrix where Neo's like, I know Kung Fu, where it's just like all of a sudden it popped in your brain and you're like, I can see into the Matrix now.
Oh, it's, you know what, I could have said it better. That's exactly what we felt like. We were like, wait a minute. Yep, we got this. Boom. And now we're just off. Now we're like, all right, how many more people are we going to hire? What are we going to do here? So yeah, that's been fantastic. It's been fun. I mean, it's weird, right? Because I think you always think like you're going to go and get a job at Marvel or DC, and you're going to draw Batman or Spider-Man or Superman, and that's going to check your whole like kid nerd box. And it does, a version of that box. But the box that this kind of thing's checking is like that thing where you make a thing,
right?
And you give it to people who want it. Like, there's no in between those two things, like.
It's interesting though, because it's like, it's such a natural extension of the creator owned idea where it's like, you are doing covers for like Marvel and DC and stuff,
yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, it's still you. It's like people are coming for you. They're not necessarily, I mean, no slander to the books you're doing covers for, but a lot of this stuff is just like people want that Skottie Young cover.
Oh yeah, they're baseball cards, right? And that's cool. Like, I get to be a part of a cool movement that's happening in comics where, we've really kind of reemerged that collecting ability or that collecting idea for people, and not in a dangerous way, in the same way that we slipped in the 90s. It's a much different beast now than it was then, to me, in a more positive way. So yeah, it's just really cool to be in a position to have an idea, make a thing, say, hey, do you guys want this thing? And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no, right? Like,
right.
It's like you said, the extension of the creator-owned book. Like, you never know. Like, I Hate Fairyland, I thought would be like, I don't know if people are going to get this, and it did amazing. Bully Wars is one of my favorite things I ever did, and I was like, man, this is going to crush it. Didn't do as well as everything else, So you just never know,
Yeah.
The Me You Love in the Dark, I thought, a 5-issue little tiny story, it'll do a 5-issue mini tiny story numbers, and we've done fantastic. It blew our mind. So we're so happy. So I don't know, it's fun getting up, playing pretend on paper, and seeing if people like it.
I have to ask, why Stupid Fresh Mess?
There's I'm a big hip hop head.
Yeah, right.
Very
I figured
much
it was related to that.
Yeah, I'm just a big hip hop head from when I was a kid, and back in the 80s, early 90s, Stupid Fresh was definitely a term thrown around. Missy has done a newer song in recent years, and it's like a throwback, just a throwback boom bap beat. And she's like, she references Stupid Fresh again. And then there's also the other side of it, where it's like, man, that is a fresh mess. Like, you were just right. So there was just I'm just combining two different, things from my my years of listening to hip hop and just kind of playing back into that old school hip hop stuff. So, and the thing is when you realize you're like, okay, we're going to incorporate and do the whole thing. And then the first thing you're like, okay, well, what's your company's name? And I was like, oh,
yeah,
I didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
And then you try to get heady, right? Like I'm an idea maker. And you start to get like two in your up your own A.
Did you ever call yourself a visionary?
No, I never got to that part. But I was like, okay,
good.
what the logo could be a light bulb. That's pretty original, right? Nobody's used a light bulb in their logo.
I like to think that Stupid Fresh Mess is basically like the Venn diagram of Skottie Young, where fresh is like the middle part. And
100%.
It seems like that's a very good fit for you, but
it is exactly. And that's what it really came down to. It was like, I love, and stupid is not used as a pejorative either.
No.
Like I mean, anybody who's read I Hate Fairyland, like that's my bread and butter. It's just like, this is so stupid. It's funny, right? Like if you just lean into it. So yeah, it's definitely the Venn diagram of me. I like you nailed that.
So I want to get into some questions. I had a question from patrons. Actually, I had a lot of questions from patrons about one specific subject, which was basically, where are the interiors, man? What's going on? Why aren't you drawing interiors? I'm curious. I talked to Russell Dowderman, who did a long run on Thor with Jason Aaron, and basically after a long run of doing that, he was burned out. He was just,
yeah, man.
He was tired. He was tired of doing it, and so he's kind of picking his spots, doing a little bit. He's doing covers. He's doing some interiors from time to time. Are you sort of just taking a break, kind of in that way, or is it that you're trying to ride this writing wave and see how much you can build that out?
It is a little bit of both of those. I did not intend to take this long of a break. I did 20 issues of I Hate Fairyland, but had been drawing interiors at that point for,
15 years.
17 straight years, so that was kind of, and in the last 5 of those years had started adding writing on the side.
Right.
So, from 2001 until I think that last issue of I Hate Fairyland came out in 2018, 2001 to 2018, straight up interior artist every month, every year. And like you said, like Russell said, that is difficult. Like you do it but it is a grind and it's fun. And people don't realize too, like a big majority of those early years, it's not even fun because it's hard. It's harder than, I said yes to working in comics before I really knew how to draw comics.
So you're figuring it out.
Yeah. So it's every day in your mind, you're failing, and not in this way that you're fishing, like, no, tell me I'm good, but really I'm bad. Right. It's really going like, I genuinely don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
It'd be like if you drove your car up and said, there's something wrong with it. Can you fix it? And I say, yes, because I've seen cars on TV. And then I'm like, I like the look of cars.
Yeah.
So if I pop the hood and then I'll be like, oh, do I just start taking things apart? What do I do? So that's the beginning of comics. So when I Hate Fairyland was ending, I was like, you know what? I've been drawing this for 20 issues. I love it. I'm going to end it for now. Give it a little pause. It's not the kind of book that needs to end or start. It's just, it's kind of like The Simpsons. You could jump in and whatever. Right. We could always restart it. So we had already started both Bully Wars and Middle West. So and Bully Wars, to be fair, was on the whole was written 10 years prior. I went in and retooled it. But that was kind of sitting in my vault for years. And then Middle West was something I had been tinkering with for a couple of years. So I was like, well, I'm writing these two things and I'm writing Deadpool. So around that time that's happening. And also I accidentally got Strange Academy greenlit. Like that, and I'm not kidding you by accidentally. Like I had been kicking around that idea for a while and just texted CB one night late and was like, man, we should do a freaking magic school at Marvel. I've been thinking about it a lot, blah, 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 blah. I went to an executive editorial retreat one time and it was just, they brought it like a couple months later. I was the only creator there for that retreat. And on the agenda was Skottie, just said Skottie's magic book. And I was like, what? I'm pitching this today? So I had Strange Academy in the wings, Deadpool on deck, and Middle West and Bully War. So I'd never written that many things at once.
Right.
As I was finishing Fairyland. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pause on the art for a minute. I'd already hit a place where Marvel was going to be mainly writing and covers. because the juice versus the squeeze on time and money and everything like that on interior pages is that just gets tough as you go along and you find that elsewhere. But so I was like, I'll take a pause for this year. I'll take a year off of pages, get these projects like going and have it be smooth. And here we are 3 years later. We did finish Middle West, and every time I thought, okay, now it's time, a thing would pop in or whatever, Middle West would end. And before Middle West ended, Jorge and I like brainstormed about 3 other projects, the Me You Love in the Dark being one of them. Then Strange Academy got started, and I thought, okay, well, and then the pandemic hit, and Strange Academy got paused technically,
right?
But I don't think anybody understands the work ethic of Humberto Ramos.
Right.
He literally writes back. He's like, paycheck or no, the show goes on. He's just like, I'm not kidding. He's just like, you guys, I don't have to tell you I'm drawing pages, but I'm drawing them. Like, and he never stopped. And so he and I on the slide just kept, we were like, we weren't really worried about, we were just like, let's not worry if I know technically they're going to pause our paychecks, but we'll just keep making the book. And if they come later and say it's canceled, then we got a lot of extra material to show somewhere down the line. Right. So the pandemic, I totally thought we paused the Me You Love in the Dark because we got at the beginning, because we were like, is this the kind of book we need to, like, is our comic books going to be around? And if they do come back after the Diamond shutdown, all of these things, like, is this the kind of book we want to do? Like this scary, even though I'd already written almost about 90% of it. I wrote most of it in a Airbnb the week that Jorge and I came up with it. So we were just like, okay, maybe we need to reevaluate this. We eventually decided after a couple months, yeah, let's do it. We're already down this road. Let's just finish it out, and then we'll see. And so each time I thought it was time for me to get back on pages or get back on a project that I was going to write and draw myself, it just, just life happens, right? Not there. It's not there yet. It's not there yet. I will say that this is absolutely sometime in the either in the end of 2021 or in 2022 is 100%. You will see interiors again. That's guaranteed. There's definitely a few things happening right now that people will find out about. This comes out on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
People will find out about it maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
If they're listening to this today on Monday.
And now a message from Bad Idea. Bad Idea is over, but there's still advertising, so I don't know what's going on. I guess it's another bad idea from Bad Idea. And now, back to the show. I mean, the people clearly thirst for it. I will say, though, not to put us on blast, neither of us I would describe as old. We are not old folks. However, sure. I will say that, like, one of the things, I'm a big runner. Like, I run like probably 5 times a week. And when I go for runs, it's very annoying to me that it's just, I suck at running. Like I used to be so easy, and now I do it and I'm just like, what the hell's wrong with my body? Stop it. Right. You're terrible. Right. I am interested in whether or not, is there a physical element to art in that way too, where it's, like you draw like an issue of Fairyland and it's like your body doesn't recover as fast as it used to. Like, is there a physical element too, or is it more just like kind of a bit of a burnout, other opportunities popped up thing?
I think it's less physical for me. I've done a great job over the last 12 years, probably 12, 13 years of really keeping a pretty hardcore schedule. Like I'm 8 to 4, 8 to 5 every weekday. I'm off weekends. I don't really care what's supposed to be done. If whatever's done in that brick of time, that's what's done. Right. And I will, which most of the time it's always done, but a few times that it's not, I'm like, I'm very sorry. This isn't, that's it. Like it's comic books, it's drawing. I'm not going to stress out about it that way. But for me, it started to become, this is where the writing part came in. For me, it started to feel like I was not getting to express any other ideas. When you were working on when you are the artist on a book and you're the artist on a successful ongoing book, you're on that for a long time.
Right.
And that's it. That's kind of your job. When I was doing Fairyland, I could write a book on the side. I wrote Rocket Raccoon for a while when I was doing that, but it was very difficult for me to write multiple books and draw a book like I Hate Fairyland, because every page was all made up. Like,
Yeah.
I don't. That's another thing that gets really weird. I've done so many books where they're not real worlds. It's like Rocket Raccoon, and Rocket Raccoon's like space, so everything's made up. I did 6 years on Wizard of Oz, which is everything's made up. Fairyland for a couple of years, everything's made up. So I'm like, I have no more ideas visually. I don't know how I can draw a tree you haven't seen yet. I've drawn 2,000 species of trees.
Right.
So for me, it was more idea based. It wasn't physical. It wasn't like, it was, I would say, probably mental exhaustion more than physical, in that, man, I want to tell that story about those kids in school. And I really want to get to that story where I kind of talk about, a little bit of my, like, a mask and auto dad relationship inside of a fantasy story. This was this feeling. So I started feeling anxious while working. And so, like, you don't want to feel like the thing you're working on that is yours. I created I Have Fairyland. I love it. It's the favorite thing I've ever made. But the second you start feeling like this is a roadblock for your other things, then it was time for me to, like, take a pause. And now it's weird because I Hate Fairyland was still selling fantastic. Like,
Right.
a lot of people would have been happy to launch at what I ended it with, but it was because I was like, I've said a ton of stuff with this. It really scratched an itch for me. I said in the last page, like, you can guarantee this is not all you'll see of Gert in this world. But for now, I have some other things I want to share with you guys. And after that, after writing Rocket for so long and writing I Hate Fairyland for so long, and Middle West and Bully Wars had started, I actually started to feel like I knew what I was doing with writing. You know what I mean? Because it was kind of the art thing, But once I had enough issues under my belt, and Deadpool and all this, once I had enough issues under my belt, I was like, oh, this isn't scary anymore, And once it wasn't scary, I was like, okay, now it's time to just press pause on the thing that takes me all day, every day, and where I was shoving writing in at night and on the weekend and on the sides, and finding the little pockets of time to write. I was like, what will my life / career look like if that's what I'm doing for the majority of time? And it gave me a time to, like, refocus on daily sketches and just drawing for myself without it being attached to a job, which, has been fun. So
I do think that, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Like, I don't think we really think about when, like, I know a lot of times people, like, lament the fact that a lot of artists have shorter runs on books these days, and we're always like, oh, they're just getting a fill in and whatever. It's like, sometimes I wouldn't be surprised if it's like artists is like, I did 6 issues of that's enough, honestly, I can do something else. Because it's, you look at, like, Fairyland, you were probably working on that for what, 3 or 4 years, and
I think it was about 2.5 years. I think it took me, because we did pretty big breaks to let me catch up in between.
But I mean, 2.5 years. I mean, it's like, this is not me downplaying Gert, because I would never downplay Gert, but I mean, like, that's 2.5 years of basically eating the same meal. Like, you're eating the same meal. It's your favorite meal. You love the meal, but at the same time, it's the same meal. And sometimes you want something different.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, Gert was probably the best chance to, at least within those pages, feel like I was doing different genres, because I could do a play.
You could do whatever you wanted.
I do a play on any genre I wanted, and put candy coating on it, and it would fit in that world. I will say that one was exhausting. I made the mistake at the beginning of not hiring, because, again, you don't know if it's going to do well or not. But I made the mistake at the beginning of not hiring, like, an editor / project manager. So for 15 issues of the 20,
damn,
I did it all myself.
Yeah.
So, like, checking print approvals at the, like, everything, approving every international publishing deal, like, going over, like, everything, like, and that's one thing I don't think people realize about Image is, like, when you have an Image book,
it's a small business.
Everything is on you. Like, you own that. Yeah, it's like a business. I've always said that Image is kind of like a mall where every store is owned by whoever owns that store, right? And so that's how the comics work. And so by the time I got done with that, I was like, finally, I hired an editor for the last 5, and then he ended up editing, most of the books that you guys have seen since then, Kent. And but it was tiring.
Oh yeah,
there was a lot of. But yeah, it really is. Just wanted to kind of explore other things.
That's an important lesson a lot of people learn when it comes to image stuff. I mean, I've talked to Eric Stevenson before where he said effectively it's just like image isn't for everybody just because of that reason, where it's like it's a lot of management that people don't realize. And sometimes it helps to have somebody. I'm interested, like you're going into this new book. You've done I Hate Fairyland and then Middle West, then Bully Wars. I mean, besides the editor thing, were there any like big things you learned from those projects that you want to carry forward in your like future creator owned stuff?
I don't know. I mean, everything was the good thing about working at Marvel for as many years as I did is I really do understand this business pretty well. Like, so everything was always really smooth. I mean, the thing that I learned, I guess one thing I kind of knew and I was glad I stuck to it as much as I loved Bully Wars, and as amazing of a partner and collaborator and artist Aaron Conley was, we had to sit down and make the tough choice that when we looked at numbers, despite our passion for it, you had to say like, we have other ideas. We have 2 more volumes in our head, but we have to realize that we're going to go in the red and we're going to probably stay in the red. And it's not a great place to be with books. And, so we had to have that hard decision. We had to have that hard conversation of like, we should probably this is going to be 1 volume for now. Doesn't mean that it's gone forever. We still own it, but that's one that that's a learning lesson, where you have to pivot. Like not every idea is going to be the idea. And you got to be able to let some things go and get back up and do something else, So I would say definitely that's one thing. But yeah, hiring people that are better at some of the things than you is key. Like, if you're not a great organizer, hire somebody who's really great at organizing, and they will make you money because you'll spend more time at the stuff you're good at.
I need somebody like that. I'm a terrible organizer.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I've always said, I mean, Kate, we talk about with my wife, she's a photographer. We talk about like spend money to make money. That's literally how it works,
Well, because it's like that at that point you're saving yourself time, and as they say, time is money, and you're buying yourself 100%. The time back, and that's huge. But okay, before we get to the meaning you love in the dark, I did want to bring up Jorge. I'm interested in how you two originally paired up, because it seems like this is one of those like lasting partnerships that just kind of jives. Because from what I understand, like the origins of the Me You Love in the Dark was you literally drove over to Denver and you just had like a powwow with Jorge, which he lives in Denver. And you just like brainstormed ideas and you came out of it with 3 ideas because you two knew you wanted to work together. What is it about that partnership that just works?
Jorge and I and my wife Casey and his wife Morgan, we just clicked so easy. Like you just have those relationships in life where you meet somebody and you could tell almost within 30 minutes that these people are my family. They don't know it yet, and I don't even know it yet, but it's happening. And I remember feeling that way about even him the first time that I met them. I was speaking at SCAD in Atlanta. And they lived in Savannah, and they were going to SCAD there. And at the time, they weren't even a couple, but they drove up to Atlanta because they knew after the talk, we'd be hanging out at the bar in the hotel. So they had come all the way up there. And I think there's a story at some point you'll have to ask him, but I think there's a story about how the car broke down and somebody else said something. But anyway, we ended up hanging out with him, and it was great. And then I remember meeting him, and his artwork started to pop up somewhere. It might have been. I definitely remember when it popped on Feathers. I was like, man, he's good fast. Mm-hmm. But and so I just kind of reached out to him, and it was one of those. Back then, I was starting to write, so I always would do that soft throw the line in the water to just be like, hey, I'm kind of coming up with some creator-owned stuff. If you ever want to work together? So it was always like I had some options of people who I loved their art, and we ended up chatting on the phone a little bit, throwing some things, and then really it was when we started talking about Middle West. I guess that's such a personal story,
right?
That it's very difficult for 2 people not to start opening up and understanding each other more than, oh man, I love the way you draw that cape on the superhero I created. Right. We're talking about abuse and fathers and mother, and what happens when a parent leaves you, and these are the kind of conversations we're having, and talking about what kind of tone that needs to be, and so there's just so much intimacy being shared, not just on phone conversations, but in the script and in the art, when I'm getting pages back of these moments that I wrote from memory, and now he's visualizing them, you're like, there's a thing happening there. And then pretty early on, we had this is probably the moment that it happened the most. Was I think he was finishing up the first arc of Middle West, and we knew the end. Like, we always knew the beginning and we always knew the end exactly
of the first arc.
We just had stuff. What's that?
Of the first arc?
Of the whole 18.
Oh, okay.
Because we had that planned out. We just didn't know exactly every stop along the road between the beginning and end. So I was like, hey, why don't you and Morgan, you guys fly out to KC for a couple days. We'll hang out and we'll spitball ideas for the rest of the arc. And that basically, once they got there and we did that, it was
locked in.
Like, that was the moment where you're just like, oh, we're people forever. Like, like that's just how it worked. And then that's how it's been ever since. So when I went up to Denver, it was the same thing. It was just, we clicked. And that's, like you said, I was like, God, I hope he never realizes that he's probably just as good a writer as anybody else in this industry. And Lee, like, which is going to happen, right? He's going to go start doing it, but I'm like, don't do it for a while, because it's so good.
I love it. Okay, so let's get into the Me You Love in the Dark. It's your new Image series with artist Jorge Corona, who we're talking about. Okay, I'm going to totally butcher the last part of Jean-Francois's name. Beaulieu? Beaulieu?
I'm going to be honest with you. I said it on an interview a couple of weeks ago, and his wife, I said something, and I said I probably didn't get it right. And then his wife replied on the thread, was like, nope, you sure didn't. And I was like, I've worked with that dude for like 16 years, and I don't have, still to this day, I've never met him in real life. And I've never known how to say his last name.
Oh my God.
But I think he's a genius.
He's a genius, yeah. And letter Nate Picos, the team you worked with on Middle West, it's continuing on. I'm going to do the solicit. An artist named Ro retreats from the grind of the city to an old house in a small town to find solace and inspiration without realizing the muse within is not what she expected. As I said, spawned from a brainstorming session you and Jorge had. I am, the first thing I want to jump into is not really the origin. We kind of know the origin, but did you and Jorge go in sort of knowing that you wanted to do something dramatically different, both in terms of length and in subject after Middle West? I mean, because, it's a 5-issue miniseries. It's a very focused, like, probably like a two-hander, as they would say in the TV world, where it's like Ro, Ghost.
Right.
Did you go in knowing you want to do something with a much different flavor, or is that just kind of how it worked out?
In some ways, that's how it worked. I mean, when we sat down and did the brainstorming, we wrote down a bunch of stuff, but there were 3 ideas that we kind of zeroed in on, and they were all radically different from each other. One of them, 2 of them would be much closer to what anybody would expect from either one of us, and probably not the Middle West. Maybe some aesthetics of Middle West, but Middle West, I think, tonally is different than anything I had done prior to that. Really what it was is we kind of looked at all 3, and once we had them, yes, that we were like, well, what if we did this one next, because it's so different and removed from Middle West. I think, if I remember this correctly, I might not, I think Jorge might have thought about another one first, because I was like, this one will be the easiest, because I was like, it's gonna be short,
right? It
won't be the funnest, because the story that we kind of came up with was small. And in my head, it was a play. Like, this whole book is kind of like a play in a way, where it's a set and some characters, and they just, so that's not going to be the funnest thing for an artist of Jorge's caliber to draw. I'll tell you, and I've said this to him, I'm like, I can't believe we thought this was going to be like I don't want to say dull visual book, but I just thought it'd be a simple visual book. And what he did with it blows my mind. Like, he's figured out how to make shadow a whole nother genre of art. And then once you guys get to the end, like, he's done. The whole series is done now.
Right.
And when you see the end, it's mind blowing. So yeah, we did end up going, it would be nice if the next one was very different from what people expect. Yeah. And we just kind of went with it.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You brought up the fact that, all these things are kind of a little bit different than what people expect from you. I do think that's kind of good, though, because I talked to Chip Zdarsky about this a lot, where it's like he was kind of like the funny guy. He was like the guy
Yeah.
that everyone, that's just who Chip is. Chip's
Yeah.
funny.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's like, at a certain point, pretty quickly in his career, that kind of became an unfair stamp on his name, where it's like he is funny, but it's not what defines him. And a lot of his work is not really
Right.
that funny. And I think that you kind of had a little bit of that too. And The Me You Love in the Dark is, Neil Gaiman comes up in the solicit, and I think that's fair because it does kind of have like adult Coraline vibes to it.
Right.
Is there a part of you that when you're kind of taking on projects that you kind of do want to push back against those expectations to a certain degree? Or is it less deliberate than that?
Yeah, I don't think it's deliberate because that's just not. I am aware that stuff's there. I mean, I'm the baby cover guy, right? So there's no possible way I don't know that that's what I'm, how I'm viewed. And then because of that, and these are all very accurate things. I mean, I love, like, I have a Alfred E. Newman tattoo. I grew up on Mad Magazine. Like, that is, I love humor comics. Like, it is, there's no way around it. So I definitely am going to write funny books. But I also watch every movie that comes out, and I like all genres. So I guess for me, it was less about like, let me show them, than it was just like, I'm going to do this. I actually would think that's why I was always, I wouldn't say nervous, but I was always like, who knows if people would get it?
Right.
I do think there have been a few things I've read recently. And one was with Me You Love in the Dark. They were like, I've always loved Skottie's pages, but it just occurred to me the other day that as I was like loving this book, I completely forgot that he's ever drawn interiors. Like, now in my brain, he's a writer.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not true, but I love that happened for him. Like, because that was a goal. Like, I think it's wildly unfair that artists are always like, if we decide to write, that people are like, oh, great. It's like, do you know what writers usually did? Just say they were writers. like literally, like, everybody that I came up with was like, I want to write comics. And they started writing, and all of a sudden they're writers.
Right.
I wanted to write comics too. I just got a job as an artist. And that's how I paid my bills at 21, but I was always like, can't wait to write my first comic. And then you realize, like, wait a minute, they put me in this weird jail cell where like, I can only do the one thing. And if I try the other thing, not only do they not believe I can do it, but they'll think I'll be really bad at it. I'm like, I feel like I'm pretty great at visual storytelling. It's not a far leap that I've read 200 scripts in the last blah, 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 that I like, there's some osmosis happening here, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think there's an interesting thing that goes along with expectations. And I'm at the age, like, I'm 43 now. So in my head, I rarely think about who's out there later. At the time of making, it's really about either just me or me and Jorge or me and Aaron. And it's like, what can we do that's going to get us going and get us excited? And then we'll worry about it later. That's why I have a lot of hard time sometimes. It takes me a while to know how to answer interview questions about the stories, because there wasn't a lot of stuff. I was just like, we're just making stuff up. We're playing pretend.
Yeah. Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick second to talk about Macroverse. Macroverse is a next-gen mobile comics app, with its tap story format making comics feel totally native on mobile devices, which you can experience over 45 series and 400 episodes, with more launching all the time. It's a perfect time to try it out too. Many of the most popular titles like Hex 11, Dead Town, Glitch, and more are free for a limited time only, so download the app for iOS or Android and binge away. Oh, and keep an eye out on macroverse.com for some major updates on new creators, new series, and new features that bring real collectability to digital comics in a new way. Massive things are coming. If you love making, reading, and or collecting comics, you won't want to miss what Macroverse is launching this summer. And now, back to the show. I don't know. I think it's interesting. You're talking about the person realizing that, like, they think of you as a writer now. It is kind of funny because, like, there's been an influx of readers, especially in like the last year, and there's a lot of people. I imagine there's like a fair amount of people who are just like Skottie Young, the writer, as opposed to they don't even know you draw, it was kind of amazing.
And I've been through that in a couple stages because, like, if you came in just getting my covers, like, again, they just thought I was the cover guy.
Yeah.
Like, and I was always my side hustle. Like, it took me forever to realize.
It's a pretty good side hustle.
I love it. It's turned out very well for me. But in my head, even to this day, it's 10 years I've been doing those covers. Like this coming year to be 10 years since I was doing those covers, since I've been doing those covers. And it's still in my mind is like it's the fourth side hustle.
Right.
Because it's not what I thought I was going to do. It's not, but there are a lot of people who got into that and they're like, did you know he does books too?
Yeah.
So I love it. I love it. There's always a new audience.
I just did a big interview with Mike Del Mundo about his covers, and we talked about the idea of covers as business cards. And honestly, like I actually think that's like really great for somebody like you because it's, you know, somebody discovers you because of your covers, and then next thing you know, they pick up I Hate Fairyland. Next thing you know, they pick up Me You Love in the Dark. It's such a, I don't know, it's fascinating because it's a really effective onboarding process, which sounds much more formal than I mean it, but you know what I'm saying.
No, and I mean you're really right there, and I'll add one level of business card-esque thing to that. First, I'm gonna say Mike Del Mundo is the smartest cover artist of all time. He's
amazing.
Nobody's brain sees ideas the way his does. He's a genius. Best cover artist of all time, in my opinion. The Anakin Skywalker walking through the Darth Vader mask,
like unbelievable,
jail cell, is the smartest cover I've ever seen. It's so good. Mike is also drawing a Strange Academy one shot, which I'm super excited.
That's awesome.
So what I'll say on the cover front, the thing that I realized very quickly once I started doing so many covers is versus like artists are on shelves, you know, if lucky once a month, right? They have a monthly book out. Now that every book launches with 3 artists attached, they might be on shelves for 3 months, and then they're off for 3 to 6 months, right? Depending on scheduling and how things ship. That is very difficult for you to then become a name that retailers remember all the time. That's why the writer side of the scale started to tip, you know, over these last years, is because their names are on shelves every week.
Right.
So the balance was kind of like these names I see as a retailer. I'm like getting my order sheet out. Hickman. You know all the names. Artists, you're like, oh, okay, Hickman. You just go back to that thing. What I've been able to enjoy and have been lucky with these covers is I now am on shelves for the last 8 or 9 years every week, if not 2 or 3 times a week, which I think started to help retailers go, oh, well, we can give him a chance. Like he's a trusted name. We know he's going to come. We know he's going to deliver. The books that I write and draw, they're going to be on time. We're not shipping you book. Middle West, we promised 12 issues without a month break and even no trade break, and we did that. So I think that a lot of that helps retailers because retailers are your first customer, right? Like before readers are getting involved, like you got to like make them trust you, and they're a partner with us, you know.
I always compare it to the Seinfeld episode where George leaves something behind his girlfriend who was going to dump him. Hit like her. I don't know if you ever watched Seinfeld, but he leaves something behind her pillow. So when like he leaves, she's going to remember him. Like the By Menon commercials, you'd always have like Costanza in your head. It's like that's kind of like the drum beat that retailers have. It's like Skottie Young cover, Skottie Young cover. And that's smart. But okay, so back into the Me You Love in the Dark.
Okay.
You know, I want to bring up one specific thing that I really loved in the first issue, which is like this is the world's most mild spoiler, but the panel where the ghost first communicates back to Ro and says, "No, you should not." And it's like this painted out black panel with the words over it. I love that panel. That's an awesome panel. And it made me wonder like how democratic the process is for all of you now that you've worked together for a while, because like that's like such a nice, elegant solution. But also one of those things is like, is that art? Is that just lettering? What is that? Like, is that something that comes directly from the script, or is that something that just comes from the vibes and process of making the book?
I know in the script that I said, we are all well-oiled machine at this point. Like we kind of can all predict each other's moves, but especially with this book, you know, there was a lot of me in the script saying, well, really it was kind of like, at the beginning, a big note, and we had already talked about it, but a big reminder of how we're going to convey this something.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was a lot of, it's a thing, something's there, but something's not. I mean, and I was like, I don't know how you're going to handle that.
Right.
So the script at the beginning was to be determined. Like, but we knew you weren't going to see whatever this is. or whoever this is. We knew that for sure, but we didn't know how we were going to handle it yet. And we didn't really want to handle it almost at all in issue 1, other than what you said, where you're just like, no, you shouldn't. So that gave us time for Jorge to just fill up sketchbook pages with options for what we were going to do here, because that's a big key point in this. And once you get to issue 2, it'll make more sense.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one of those moments that was like, here's the vibe, here's the thing, here's what's going to be said. Once we figure out the thing, because you got to remember, I was writing all this back to back to back to back. So we didn't really know how he was going to draw any of this yet. I didn't know what Roe looked like. We definitely didn't have that house modeled out, which is awesome.
I love that you actually didn't you credit like a house modeler in the credits?
100%. And he's in a studio with Jorge, and that was, I think he even said, no, you don't have to. And I was like, you're crazy. Like, yeah. That is such a key element. And you guys got to really realize that entire house is designed, every room in that house, because Jorge's mom's an architect. So from Venezuela, and she's here in the States now, but so she's an architect. So Jorge kind of did a loose design, had his mom be like, is this how this works? And she said yes and no and yes and no, and then gives it to his friend in the studio, and he builds this thing and he sends it over to me. I mean, there's rooms decked out with furniture that we never see in the book, but the whole house is worked out. And that you're going to, I mean, in issue 1, you see shots. You're like, I could have never put a camera there. I would have never thought of it because I'm not an engineer or architect. Right. So if I'm drawing panels, everything's fake when you're just drawing comics. You're like, perspective line, here's a bookshelf.
Yeah.
But with this, we had to give him credit because he built a thing that became so integral to Roe moving around this place and allowing Jorge to visually tell a story in such a way that I really don't see that often in comics.
Oh yeah. I got to bring up something with the house, and it was like the biggest question I had from the first issue. And so in the beginning of the book, I think it's even in the preview pages, Roe is being taken around by a real estate agent, and she's like, oh, you don't want to see this, like, and she won't say why, and then she's like, oh, it's like supposedly haunted. Why in the world would a real estate agent not think a painter would be interested in a haunted house? I feel like that is like that's insane. Like painter, I feel like painters would like that.
Well, we're creatives, so we would think that. But when you go to small towns, you gotta remember who the real estate agent has never left this town. Her parents never left that town.
She knows it's a cursed place.
Yeah, and they just, they're like, it's a different vibe when you get out to these small Midwestern towns. It's a different vibe and it's a different speed, and so that would be a thing where she wants Roe's business and she wants a little bit more money, and maybe the value of this house and the rent, renting this house for that amount of time is not going to. So there's all that kind of mentality that I'm pretty used to coming from such a small town, that they don't understand the way that creatives. And again, this is a wide brushstroke. I'm not saying that all people from small towns don't get it,
right?
But you know what I'm saying. It's like me at a family reunion or a Thanksgiving. We're like, how's the comic book? How's them cartoons doing? Like
yeah.
It's like that kind of like, oh yeah, I told so and so at school. They said, oh, he could probably come teach a class. You're like, that's not how. No, like I have a real job.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I get it. Okay, so Roe Meadows, great lead. Very big fan of her in the first issue. I am interested in, largely, at least in the first issue, a lot of it is about how Roe is really struggling. Like, she's had success. She was a barista before, but now she's a successful artist. There's a gallery involved, et cetera, et cetera. At least the part about the artist struggling to motivate themselves and to just draw. I'm curious if like that part, is that autobiographical for like you and Jorge? Is that a part of like your, self-doubt and things like that? Or is that more just, she's a great person for this type of story?
I can't speak for Jorge on that front, but for me, for sure, what I was thinking of, mine was probably, I did hit a point. I did have a very dividing line in my career where I was drawing in a way that I thought I wanted to draw because that's how my favorite people drew.
Oh, sure.
And so I did that for a long time, and I was always wondering why drawing didn't feel fun and why I didn't ever like my drawings, because I'm not an insecure person by nature. So it's not like I wanted to like everything, but it wasn't working the way I wanted to work. And then there was a line where I let go, and around it was right there around Oz when I started the Oz books, and I let go of all the superhero veneer and just started pulling a brush and just drawing, and I found how I draw, and all of a sudden that happened. So yes, there was a period of time where I felt like Roe visually, but what I would probably say that was the most applicable for me was a chunk of years where I was determined to write my own books and draw them. And I just could not get out of my head with, I don't know of how to do it or do it, which way to do it. There was a lot of, again, like, well, the world thinks that I'm this and I need to tell them that I'm not. And there's also, that thing of like, well, artists are never good writers, or, like all of these things that were in my head where I was trying to fight these demons up here that really weren't real. There was just things I was making up. And I remember I did Oz for 6 years. And by the time I was done with that, I was finishing Oz pages by midday, a couple of pages. And so I had the rest of the afternoon to sit, and it was always like, all right, create your own book. All right. Okay. And then I'd sketch a little bit, and it very much like Roe, where you're just like, come on, like, this is what I do. Why isn't it doing it? You know,
just stare at the cursor and it'd be blinking at you.
Yeah.
Like, where are the words?
And part of that was me as I'm trying to come up with ideas by finding some characters that I'm drawing, and is that maybe how to do it? And it was very much like what Roe, what I had Roe go through in that in the first issue, is that thing where she's leaving to redefine herself. She became successful at one thing, but also doesn't necessarily feel that that's really her. And that's how I felt in the beginning of my career visually, which is I became successful at something and I like it okay, but it didn't feel like me. Like, I grew up reading Mad Magazine and Calvin and Hobbes and Archie and The Far Side and Ralph Snart and The Max and, all these really weird, like, outside the box books. And I'm drawing X-Men. Yeah. I'm drawing Spider-Man and Venom, which I love those books. I like reading them. And I appreciate drawing them, but it never felt like this is what I'm doing. Right. So that's a lot of what I think I put into Roe on that front. Yeah.
It's, talking about that, when you and Jorge were first coming up with this, you're both artists. Were you sketching Roe as you were coming up with the idea? Was like that part of it? Or is it more like broader strokes?
Nope. When Jorge agreed to come on and co-create Middle West with me, which, I had a bunch of stuff cooked up for that already. The one thing that he asked was for me not in a mean way, but just like, don't show me drawings.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because Jorge had been a fan, right? He had already been a fan.
But he didn't want that in his brain.
Right. Exactly. And I was like, that's amazing that you asked that. I didn't intend to. I wouldn't have done it anyway, because I know that, because I'm the same way. If you show it to me now, that's how it's going to be. So he asked that, and that helped us establish and it's helped me on every book that I've worked on now. I don't give notes on colors until the artist does, like, because you drew it, you have a vision for it. The only time I'll jump in is if I feel like, whoa, it's super off, which Jean is never super off. But I stay back until the very last line of the process on visuals, because I can be a very assertive person. I can be, if I really have something in my head, I'm definitely going to try to get it out. But so I want everybody else to feel super comfortable that their vision of what they wanted is on the page before I have anything to say for it. So I didn't sketch anything, but while I was writing up stuff, for my last days in Denver, Jorge was doing a little bit, but no, it was a little while before we started seeing some Roe sketches for sure.
Yeah. I have to say, I'm like terribly envious of your Airbnb session where you actually wrote the book, because I've been like thinking about that for a while, doing like a one-man like sketched retreat where I just go and spend a couple days away from everything. Not that I don't love my cats and my wife and everything, sure, but my cats are always yelling at me. I'm like, sometimes you need an escape. I'm very envious of that.
Yeah, me and my wife, actually, she texted me about this today, because I do need to go do that again very soon. And my wife, who used to be a singer-songwriter, well, I say is a singer-songwriter, but that's what she used to focus on mainly, actually texted me today and said, hey, you know how you're going to go get a house soon? I think I'm going to do it too, and maybe use it to write some songs.
Nice.
And I was like, that is awesome.
That is awesome.
I can't tell you how helpful that is when you can let go of all your familiar surroundings and go to another place where you're not going to abide by hours. and that was so cool, man. I found this actually my wife did. Casey found this perfect like bungalow here in Kansas City. So I drove back from Denver, went straight to this Airbnb that was all like natural woods, and
Yeah.
it had those old bungalows, has like the attic kind of room. So it's like perfectly small. I shut all the blinds. I lit candles, played creepy music all day and night. Like
I love that you basically were Roe as you were writing Roe.
100%. Totally poured glasses of wine. I mean, like leaned in, and I had never done that before. Like, but I know, like I've talked to Neil Gaiman about this before, and obviously there's a lot of other authors who do that, but they will go to a place and like just be away.
Yeah.
Because you're away from your stuff, then there's no distractions for it. And
yeah.
It was really cool. I mean, I'll definitely do that some more in my life. It was really cool.
I gotta say, that's one part about Roe that I definitely don't relate to is, music, 100%. Music is a huge part of my process. Drinking wine, I would be asleep before I write like anything like remotely useful. I would be like straight up asleep. I have like 2 drinks these days, and I'm like, out.
Yeah, that's my wife is always saying that. She's like, I can't have a glass of wine right now. I'll go sleep.
Yeah, it's sleepy time. It's sleepy time. Okay, well, I do think it's interesting that it's a miniseries. Like both of all of your books previously were announced as ongoings. Was that just because that's what Roe and her story needed, or is it because you want to try something a little bit more finite?
100% both. It's 50-50 then. I definitely love this story. Could not be longer. I think horror comics they're a challenge. I think we wanted the right amount of space to create tension, which means it needs to be slow when it needs to be slow, and then it needs to be really fast when it needs to be really fast, and none of it needs to be drug out too long. And also the kind of relationship side needs the right amount of space. You can't give that too much. If you give that too much, then everybody's out. I think so. This story is as long as it is because that's the story. But I also do like the idea after so many years of doing long stories where you're constantly leaving something hanging at the end of a mini, there's like, here's a mini story, here's a mini story. There is a period like right now where I'm really interested in getting in and getting out on the story and feeling like, oh, I did another one, like because of, like I said, I think Fairyland changed me in that way where, writing and drawing a book for that long was like, wow, that's a lot of years. Like that, that's years of your life. My kids were this age and now they're much older at the end of that road,
Right.
That's why I've never had this mini situation. I mean, Bully Wars ended up being that, but I also conceived that so many years before we did it, where the Me You Love in the Dark, it's kind of fun. Like I still have butterflies at the creation of it, where by the time when we ended Middle West, it still was like it was a couple years past us starting, about 3 years past starting it, and then it being the last issue coming out. But man, when you're 3 years past the conception of a thing, you're already moving on to another thing. You've lost a little bit of that excitement that it came out. You're like, oh yeah. And you hate to admit it, but you're also like a little relieved that you're done, and especially a story like Middle West, like writing that last issue was difficult. There's very heavy content to deal with. Writing that whole thing was difficult, but yeah, I think I'm going to try some more short stories here coming out. I always, I feel like I can wrap my head around those a little better.
I also think that, it's a good time to do it because there used to be the idea that minis were kind of a place where people like stories are go to be forgotten to a certain degree. Right. It's like retailers wouldn't order them that heavy. Right. Readers would pass on them because it's like in a weird way, like I think this is a very superhero influence mentality that minis are less important, if that makes sense, because they're not part of the ongoing thread. But I think that's changed. I mean, I think it's interesting too, because it's like I talk to people who are kind of newer to reading comics, and a lot of them want finite stories. They want a beginning, middle, end. And I think that actually, I mean, it's like you could make Roe's story an ongoing, but I think that wouldn't be what was right for the story. And I think it works well for this environment. I am interested though. Did you all ever consider doing it as a graphic novel?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously this would be perfect for one. I just don't that's still a part of the business model that's I'm unsure of yet, and
Right.
I'm still I still think there's a great market, and based on our numbers for this first issue, we were right. We're very glad that we went singles because it worked, and I think it's giving everybody. I think the thing with graphic novels, and I will do something like that at some point, but I think a con to a graphic novel is you get a burst of people talking about it that first week or that first couple weeks, and then it kind of just now it exists and it's out there, right?
It's sort of like a Netflix show.
Exactly. And which is like now people like all the streaming places are going back to releasing weekly episodes because the conversation lasts longer.
Right.
Like we watched Sweet Tooth, and I thought Sweet Tooth was really fun, and I tell Jeff, I was like, it's weird because it's like everybody's talking about it this week, but like a month later, it's completely buried away again with every other thing that we all love, but it was buried. Where at least with monthlies, we're going to keep the conversation alive for the next 6 months. And new people, we give new people time to discover it while we're still having the conversation, so in some ways that's probably the thing that I still love about the old school single issue monthly schedule is that ability to keep everybody kind of talking about it. And, podcasts and reviewers are going to have conversations about it for the next X amount of time,
Yeah. I mean, I think too, it's like, somebody like Brian Hibbs always talks about how single issues are great because it's like it builds the cash flow. But then on top of that, it's like in some ways, when that conversation is happening, it becomes the best marketing you can have for the eventual trade paperback.
100%. Yeah. It's and Brian's right on that front too. I mean, again, create our own books are out of our pocket. We're not getting page rates. A company is not giving us paychecks. Like we are making books and hoping that later people buy them, and so the monthly sales definitely help make sure that the artists and the colorists and the letterers and everybody's getting paid to help make the book.
Yeah.
If we went straight to graphic novel, it's not to say that it wouldn't, but retailers taking a chance on a $4 book is it's a much easier prospect than taking a chance on a $20 graphic novel hardcover.
Right.
That they don't know is going to work or not, So it also gives the retailer a sense of like, is this a thing that we'll support in the graphic novel version?
Well, and it's like the other thing too is I think to a certain degree, actually to a significant degree, like the book market audience and like the direct market audience are kind of discrete audiences. And so it's like you can still have like the Me You Love in the Dark. Let's fast forward to like 6 months from now or something like that. That could be still like a stone cold smash at like Barnes and Noble. And it's not, and like single issue sales or the single issue buy-in is not going to affect that. And it's like, I get it. I think situationally it makes sense. It's like, I don't blame Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips for doing their thing as graphic novels, because those dudes have been doing this for so long. They could release it as like, I don't know, a really complex napkin that unfolds in front of you and people would still buy it. But
right. And they have retailers. The thing is in 2 years, in 3 more years, if Jorge and I stack up 5 more properties or projects that work equally as well each time, and retailers are like, you know what, we're down, we're in, we've bought season tickets for you guys. If that happens, then we could absolutely see ourselves jumping over to the graphic novel side, because I would buy Ed and Sean's books and sell them, and I'm not even a part of them. That's how trusting I am that I'd make my money back and then some on their books. They're a trusted name now because of how many years they've been working together. They tackle a very similar genre. So I love that model. And I've talked, like when Ed was coming, I got on the phone with Ed and we talked about exactly what you brought up was the pros and cons of the graphic novel model. So it's definitely something that I hope to get to. And can trust that it will work out, because I think that it is. It's just I need a little bit more analytics on it before I'm like full in.
Man, I love the season ticket idea. That is actually a really great way to describe it. But I feel like that kind of transitions into the last question, which is a patron question, not related to Me You Love in the Dark at all. It's related to where you are currently located, Kansas City. Elliot Metz, a patron, asked, What's your favorite barbecue place in Kansas City? You can only name one, no hedging. It's very specific.
Okay, yeah, it's Oklahoma Joe's.
Oklahoma Joe's?
Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. It's Joe's. It's Kansas City Joe's, or Joe's Kansas City. It used to be Oklahoma Joe's.
Okay.
When I first started to come here to visit, it was Oklahoma Joe's, but they split up, blah, blah, whatever, legal stuff. It's now Joe's Kansas City or Kansas City Joe's. I can't remember. We just call it Joe's.
What makes it the most elite? Is it just the barbecue? What is it?
I love their spicy barbecue sauce. They have a lineup of great sandwiches, like their barbecue sandwiches. They got a sandwich called the Z-Man that's like got, brisket and cheese and an onion ring then they've got one that's like it's a pulled pork one, but it's got fried jalapenos on it. It's just
Wow.
So they got a really dope selection of sandwiches. Their burnt ends are awesome. So I'd say they are definitely hands down. If somebody's coming in, town and they want barbecue, we definitely line them up with Joe's. I will say that my favorite beans in town are Jack Stack's. Jack Stack's barbecue beans are so good.
That's amazing.
So sometimes we'll get Joe's, but then we'll swing by Jack Stack's and bring them home. So yeah,
so you kind of like buffet the barbecue places,
yeah,
like a little bit here, a little bit there.
100%. Like a couple weeks ago, when you live in KC, at some point you stop. You're just like, I can't eat. Like your barbecue is basically what you get when people come in town.
Yeah.
So when our friends came in town, we had like, oh, which ones do we get them? So we got like 4 spots. Like we were like, we're gonna get some barbecue from Joe's, from Jack Stack's, from Woodyard. It's from just about 4 places, and that we really did just put out like a buffet. And we're like, whose burn ends are the best. So it's kind of fun.
I feel like that's a very, I don't know, like that's one of those things when I live in Alaska. It's like people are like, what's it like living near all the mountains and all the huge water and everything? I'm like, we have mountains? Where?
Yeah.
I was like,
yeah.
Oh shit, there's mountains over there. But
Right.
I had an amazing food experience. My friend, I have a bunch of friends that live in Portland, and one of my favorite experiences I've ever had is my friend planned out a day where she and 2 friends, other friends of ours, she plotted out this entire bike trip where we biked across Portland, and she had different stops for places for us to eat. And we stopped by like a grilled cheese food cart. We stopped by this place that had like this amazing happy hour. We just like all these different places. We probably had like 50,000 calories that day, but my God. And they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that if I wasn't there coming from Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, like,
For sure.
I don't know. It's like, sometimes it's like you're treating your guests, but you're also treating yourself.
100%. Yeah, that's well. I love when people come visit because it is an excuse to give Because also Casey's like, it's not my wife's favorite. I mean, she likes it, but it wouldn't. It's not her go-to. Just like she wants Italian all the time, and I'm like, ugh. All right, like I like Italian, but I don't always want Italian. So we use whenever somebody come in, I'm like, yes,
Barbecue time.
She can't say no now.
I love it. I love it. Well, Skottie, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about barbecue, the Me You Love in the Dark, everything that's going on with you, and everything else. I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you, man. It was great talking to you, and I hope to do it again soon.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with cartoonist Skottie Young. You can find Skottie on Twitter and Instagram at Skottie Young and his work in the recently launched image series, The Me You Love in the Dark. Love Off Panel, want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing it on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel, and when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content, and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SlicedFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buon, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Zach Thompson, Bradley Rader, Carl Troy, Megan Marsden, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Garino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Jeff Weir, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambeg, AbductedTheComic.com, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torrin Grunbeck, Fuzzbubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Dow, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Danny Ollie, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Liana Kangas, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwant, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WQ Comics, Akil Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Union, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Polito, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Massey, Adam Bogert, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Odd Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.